In this lecture, we are looking at the model view architecture in Qt-Quick. The model view architecture, abbreviated MVC, is a design pattern that allows you to separate the way data is stored and the way data is displayed to the user. There are three components: the model, which stores your data, the view, which displays your data, and the controller, which mediates the exchange of data between the model and the view. Now, Qt doesn't implement the model view controller pattern completely. It takes the controller and strips it down to a delegate, and the delegate does part of the job that a full-blown controller would do. In QML specifically, the delegate defines how each row in the list view is going to look. You have to keep in mind that you have three components in Qt-Quick: the model, the view, and the delegate. Now that we have an idea about the model view delegate architecture in Qt-Quick, what components are available to us in Qt-Quick so that we can use them in QML? Well, for the view, you have list view, grid view, and a few other components that we're not going to talk about in this chapter. For the model, there is a list model and XML list model. We are going to look at all these models. And the delegate is really a chunk of QML code that controls the look of each row in your list view, as we're going to see. Okay, and one thing you need to understand is that the data that goes in your model can really come from anywhere. It can come from the database, the internet. It can come from a file that you are storing on your drive. It can come from static data that you type in your QML code. And a model gives you a common interface that you can use to abstract the real source of data away so that it can be used by many components. For example, you can take one list model and feed it to a list view and a grid view, and there is a common interface to pass the data back and forth between these two components, and you don't need to worry about the details of how the data is really stored. This is the benefit of having the way you store data abstracted away in a model like list model and XML list model. Okay, now we want to focus on list model a little bit. The way you use a list model in your QML code, you really give it a list of elements that you are going to display. You can put in these elements statically when you define a list model, and this is how it looks in code. You have a list model component, and inside you have a bunch of list elements that contain attribute and value pieces of data. We're going to look at this in a moment. Okay, you can put static list elements in your list model. That's one way to put in the data, but you can also use any of these methods that are available to you to manipulate your model at runtime. You can append data, you can clear data, you can get an element, you can insert, move, remove, and you can use all these functions. We are going to have a chance to use some of these in one of the upcoming lectures. There are also two properties that are available to you. Count gives you the number of elements in your model, and dynamic roles is a property that allows you to modify the nature of your model at runtime. If you look at this append method, it takes a parameter of JS object dictionary. I want to focus on this a little bit. If you are familiar with JSON, you're going to recognize what we have here. This is a JSON object, and this is how you pass data in your model dynamically. You pass something like this. We just looked at an example of how you can build your list model, and you see that it takes country and capital here. If we were to put in a piece of data like this dynamically, we would pass in a JSON object that is structured like this. Okay, when you pass a list element dynamically, you pass it as a JSON object. This is what we mean here. In QML terminology, these attributes are called roles. Okay, so we have two roles in our list model here. We have a country role and we have a capital role, and we give values to these roles. These roles can be named to be anything really, but you need to remember the name you gave them here because you're going to use them to refer to this piece of data in your delegates, as we're about to see. We just looked at one type of model that we have. We want to look at XML list model. This is a model that allows you to wrap around an XML file that is either local or coming from the internet. And it allows you to automatically read the data from the XML file and feed it to your list view or other views that you might have in your XML file. The source property allows you to specify where the XML file is going to come from, and you have a set of queries that allow you to fetch the data in your XML file. And you can use XPath. This is a technology that allows you to parse an XML file and take the data that you want from that file. We're going to see how this works. A takeaway from here is that this model wraps around an XML file and allows you to extract data from there automatically and feed that to your list view or grid view if you happen to need that. And the last piece of the puzzle that we're going to look at is the list view, which is going to tie all the things we've talked about together. The list view has a model property, which links to the model that you want to show in the list view. You have a delegate that controls how each row in the list view is going to look. And we have highlight, header, and footer that allows you to decorate your list view to make it look better. And right here, we have an example of a list view. This is how you define it. And we're going to look at this in detail in a few upcoming lectures. Okay, this should be all to spice up your appetite to work with models and views in Qt Quick. In the next lecture, we're going to start looking at list view and list model in detail. I'll see you there.